IPMNation.com.
Previously on Angry Drunk Tales.
And I can't trust you to keep your mouth shut when you've been drinking. We both have too many secrets for anybody to find out.
Now, no more drinking, Sue Ellen.
Be angry.
Why won't Cliff talk to me?
I guess he doesn't want to hurt you anymore.
But I love him.
Sue Ellen's in trouble, JR, and your child's life is in danger.
Me write angry emails.
We'll go now and let you rest before JR brings you home.
Sue Ellen's not coming home, Mama. Not for a while, at least.
Episode 16. This is my last post on the subject, but not really.
Me still angry. Me continue to write long, rambling, drunken emails. Me continue to be angry over incident several weeks ago. Me have emotional intelligence of 5-year-old child. Me bitter and frustrated with myself over being drunken 300-pound tub of shit. Me undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. Me
half monkey, half human.
Me write angry emails. Me hate everyone.
Welcome to episode 16 of Angry Drunk Tales. I'm Matt Connerton.
And I'm Jen Coffey.
We are the former roommates of
half monkey, half human.
And as we continue our series, just to give people kind of a present-day update, we continue to not receive any new emails from
half monkey, half human
since we last told you that we hadn't gotten any new emails. Now, no worries, of course. We have plenty of material already.
Plenty of material.
Yeah, this series will have a long run no matter what. But the well is run dry for the moment. I think eventually, though, he won't be able to help himself.
Well, it may happen. He may have deleted the addresses.
Yeah,
but he does, and he does always have access to the IPM page where he can, go ahead and contact us yet again.
Yeah, and
to try and get your show, Matt Connerton Unleashed, taken off of IPM Nation. Which, to remind folks, that was really hysterical to us, considering that Matt owns the radio station, and when you fill out the contact form, it goes to Matt. But I digress from our topic.
Yeah, he's been threatening, and in the last emails that we did get from him, he was threatening to have us thrown off the air and this and that, and yeah, he did send that one email to IPM Nation complaining about us, and he's just an idiot.
That's awfully kind of you.
It's funny how, there's an interesting parallel here with, recently we had the whole thing with, which seems to be over, but the saga with Slicko and his stepfather, Howie G, and Slicko's mother. And there was this very strange thing where Howie G wanted to get Slicko thrown off of IPM Nation. And it's like, what? It's always interesting to me how people think that if they just complain about somebody, they can get their show canceled. Not
only that, it's just,
like I'm just going to go, oh,
so
okay,
you have
don't like Slicko?
So you have a personal beef with someone.
Right.
Okay, but how low do you go to stoop to the level of trying to get them thrown off of something
right.
that has nothing to do with you?
Right.
And is something they enjoy or they work for or they put a lot of effort into, like producing a radio show for the station.
Yeah.
To go to that extreme of attempting to get them thrown off is really a low blow.
Well, and the narcissism of someone to believe that they can actually make that happen. You know.
Yeah, right.
Like with Howie G. Like, I'm just going to go, oh, okay, so you're upset with him, so, yeah, I'll cancel his show, sure. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Although you can't, I'm sorry, that falls as number 2. Number 1 to me is
half monkey, half human.
Sending a message to IPM Nation to cancel Matt Connaughton Unleashed, and you're the station owner.
Right,
You just can't get better. Really, you want me to cancel my own show on my own station?
Yeah, just
not going to happen there, buddy.
Bizarre.
No, doesn't work that way.
So when we last left off with our story, we ended with a dramatic reading of a long email from
half monkey, half human,
which sounded like as I had said, the ice was beginning to thaw.
That was the first time he'd actually said something in a kind sort of a way toward me, referring to me as his favorite roommate.
Right. Still not really, directly taking any responsibility for anything, of course. But he and I had our summit where we actually spoke for about 90 minutes, mostly him, because he's much more of a talker than I am. But he and I talked for a while, and things seemed like they were finally back on track. Perhaps, and that's where we kind of left off, but I did have a worry that, I remember thinking, well, we're not out of the woods yet, because you and he still had to talk, and I had no idea how that was going to go. But we had kind of left it as, so hopefully the next day, you and
half monkey, half human
would talk, and I was hopeful that you would have the same productive and positive conversation that
half monkey, half human,
and I seem to have. But here's what happened. So you had sent that email. Remember that email that I was confused by because it seemed to be out of order in the chain on my my
where
Gmail.
I spelled it out of what my issue was between
half monkey, half human
and I was. Not about anything else, but between
half monkey, half human
and I, where my issues were.
Right. Well, the next morning, so this was the exchange. So, well, you had said, okay, I'll talk to him. Let's get it over with. So I went and knocked on his door, and he didn't answer. So I wrote him an email. I said, Jen's ready to talk. I knocked on your door, but I don't think you're home. But she is ready to talk with you if you would like. Now, when he and I talked the previous night, he was like, okay, tomorrow, Jen and I will talk. I want to talk to Jen and iron this out.
Right, and then you sat down and talked with me, and I finally said, all right, I'll hear him out, but he's got to hear me out too.
Right, and we'll get it over with.
Yep.
So he wrote back to me a little bit later and said, was sleeping, very rare day off for me. No one's supposed to call or anything. Now notice, now what's interesting about that is, so the night before he had told me that he wanted to talk to you as soon as possible, hopefully the next day. But then there's something a little passive-aggressive about how he says, was sleeping, very rare day off for me, no one's supposed to call or anything. Like he's trying to now put me on the defensive, like I wasn't supposed to go and knock on his door.
Right.
It's interesting. It's not like, oh, sorry.
Well, the conversation you had with him the night before, he finished off a 12-pack. In the course of your conversation, so
he probably didn't even remember a lot of it.
You were dealing with the drunk nice guy because he was in nice guy mode. He's got that Jekyll Hyde thing going on,
right?
And now you're dealing with the sober grump who hasn't had his morning beer yet,
right? Yes, his hair of the dog.
Yeah. So maybe that's why. I don't know. I can't fathom thinking that way. When I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I do it.
Right. And just the tone of that was a red flag. I was like, uh-oh. Because it wasn't even like, oh, sorry, I was sleeping. Let's definitely do that later today. No, it wasn't even that.
Yeah,
it was
there wasn't even an invitation to come back.
Yeah. No one's supposed to call or anything. Like implying that I'm an asshole for knocking on his door. So then I'm still trying to be kind and be the diplomat, and I write back, I thought that might be the case. So then, But
here's the kicker. He's up writing emails, damn it.
I know, right?
It's like okay, so I just found out you did knock on my door. Why don't I step out of my room like an adult instead of hiding in my room like a 5-year-old?
Yeah.
And say, okay, and you wanted to talk to me.
Well,
the attempt was made. You want to talk to me.
Well, then he writes back and says, Jen sent me something that I am choosing not to respond to because it was so accusatory. I thought it best to wait on it. So now he's pissed about that email that you sent to him.
Well, truth hurts, doesn't it?
Right. So at this point, I'm like, oh, no. So I just wrote back, I appreciate it. In other words, I appreciate him not responding to you. And that was the end of that email chain for July 4th. And at this point, I'm like, I'm already getting the feeling that my entire conversation with him was for nothing because I'm like, he's not even
because you're too nice of a guy.
Well,
and
he's
you're
not
trying to always see the good in somebody else and
no, I want
or try to
not in this
bring.
case. Not in this case. I was just trying to get him to not be an asshole. But
you're not the jackass whisperer, so how the hell are you going to pull that off?
Oh, I mean, at this point, I will freely I hated him by this point. I completely despised him and thought he was a complete prick. So it wasn't a matter of trying to see the good in him. It was a matter of trying to get him to not be a complete asshole. But I was rapidly losing faith. I mean, like I said, I went to bed the previous night thinking, okay, we might be able to get this back on track. But now with this little exchange between he and I, it's like, I'm seeing the writing on the wall here.
He's full of excuses.
Yeah.
When it comes right down to actually having a face-to-face discussion, he has excuses.
Right.
And there's more to that.
So that was actually the end of the exchange for July 4th. So no big dramatic readings there. And then, but before we get to the next batch of emails, which isn't until July 9th, something pretty major happens between July 4th and July 9th, and I think, was it the next day?
I thought it was later on that same day.
It might have been later on that same day, and this is very important.
Yep.
You went and knocked on his door yourself.
Yep.
Because
you were in the bathroom.
I had just gone into the bathroom, and I hear you knocking on his door, and I stayed in the bathroom and just listened. I go in, I hear you knocking on
half monkey, half human
his door. Loudly, and I'm thinking, oh, this will be interesting. This could actually be really good or really bad.
He wasn't answering, and then he finally went, yeah, and because he won't actually get up and come to the door and open it or anything.
Oh, God forbid.
So you have to open the door,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I just sat in the bathroom and listened, and waiting to come out and intercede if I needed to. But my thought process was, if I can, I'm just going to sit here and listen because I'm thinking, hopefully, best case scenario, you and he are able to have a good, positive, productive dialogue without anyone interfering. But also, at the very least, even if it didn't go well, at least this was your opportunity to say to him face-to-face everything you'd been feeling. So I sat there and listened. There were a couple of times I almost came out and because there was one particular thing that
half monkey, half human
was saying where I almost wanted to come out and say,
half monkey, half human.
That's not fair. And that was his whole excuse about, well, no one came and talked to me about what happened that night, even though he had acknowledged to me during our face-to-face conversation that he had deliberately kind of brushed Jesse off whenever Jesse would try to say hello to him. And that came up, and I almost came out and said, hold on.
Half monkey, half human.
I gotta interject here. That's not fair.
And to add to that, when Angela went to his door and she knocked, and he said, yeah. And she said, would you talk to me? And he said, no.
Right.
Not interested.
That's right. Yep.
Wouldn't open it. Well, not interested.
Yeah. This is one of the single douchiest things about
half monkey, half human
during this whole thing is he plays the victim. He acts like a little kid who goes and hides in his room, and he's so pissed off that no one else is coming to him to discuss anything with him, and yet whenever anyone tries to do exactly that, he's not interested in talking. Setting up an absolute no-win scenario. You cannot win with him in this circumstance. You know, he's
No.
pissed that you won't come and talk to him, and then when you come and talk to him, he's pissed and doesn't want to talk to you.
Right.
Um,
That's how 5-year-olds behave.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
always
yeah.
through
He's
a
a
closed
petulant child.
through a closed door or from behind a computer screen.
Yeah. So we should. What do you remember about your interaction with him? Because you did literally almost all the talking.
It was horrific.
You were very
You know,
emotional.
It was hard not to be. I was only a couple of days out of the hospital, and one of the biggest things I kept asking him was why. Why did he keep emailing me in the hospital? Why couldn't he just stop, wait for me to get out of the hospital and sit down and have a conversation? And I remember repeatedly saying, why?
Yeah.
And
he had no answers. He
just kept going, nobody cares about me. Or he was all so self-absorbed that he had no compassion, no regret, no nothing for stooping to the level of emailing me in the hospital when I wasn't even involved with the conflict to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think you made some comments about how you felt about what you heard, and I mean, basically it was a lot of that. It was, stop bad-mouthing my son to my boyfriend.
Right.
He's a grown adult. He wrote you in a very adult message. He's tried to talk to you. You ignored him.
Yep.
Matt knocked on your door. You ignored him. Angela knocked on your door. You ignored her.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm standing here and you're just sitting there saying nothing. You don't. How? I remember saying, if I wouldn't email the person I hate the most on the planet.
Yep.
While they were in the hospital.
Right.
That's just fucked up.
Yeah.
And he had just no care, no
nothing
compassion.
To say. He had nothing to say. Nope. And then finally the doorbell rang, and that interrupted the conversation, and you went to see who was at the door, and that was it. I've always wondered what would have happened had that not happened, had the doorbell not rung. Would he eventually have said something? But he had literally nothing to say.
What was it that you said about it that shocked you?
Just that his just lack of compassion. Just that he could just stand there coldly and not say anything. Like, not even say, I'm sorry, you haven't been feeling well. He could have at least even said that. That wouldn't have included him taking responsibility for anything. At least show, I'm sorry you haven't been feeling well. You know what I mean? He couldn't even do that. Couldn't even do that.
Nope. And I was in the hospital for 3 days, and at this point, I think I'd only been home for 2.
Yeah.
Never once did I ever get "Are you okay? How are you feeling?"
No.
Angela, on the other hand, would send me messages. How are you doing? Are you okay? Can I get you anything? Can I do anything for you? She continually checked on me a number of times when I first came home, even just using Messenger.
Yeah.
And sending me messages. Can I get you anything on the way home? Or how are you doing? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So showing she really cared and was concerned about what had happened.
Yeah.
It was a pretty, probably the scariest episode we ever had.
Knowing the version of
half monkey, half human
we were dealing with before all this happened, would you have ever imagined that he would behave that way?
No.
Where you're standing in his door, actually sort of in tears.
I wasn't I wasn't. I will fully admit that I was absolutely bawling my eyes out when I was trying to talk to him.
And him to be so cold, I never would have imagined.
Physically shaking.
Yeah.
And just with all the devastation of, what had happened with my son, being in the hospital, the ER thing was really stuck with me, that, and the fear that Jesse had that he was watching me die, and just all of that, and all of the emails from him, and all of the begging to stop.
Yeah.
Please, can we just wait till I get home and talk face to face?
Yeah.
Thinking, I'm not asking you for a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just asking you to let me get out of the hospital.
Right.
And just, I lost it. I was very emotional, and I couldn't help it. It poured out. And I stood there and I was crying, and I kept asking him why. Just tell me why.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't. He was just cold.
Yeah.
Colder than an ice cube. It would be like, if you touched him, you'd probably friggin' end up having a reaction and freezing and breaking into a piece of pieces because he was so cold. It was. I don't think the guy has a heart at all. How anyone can be. I would, if I was on the receiving end of that conversation, I would have really, no matter what I felt, I could put that aside for the moment and say, I totally fucked up and I'm sorry, and I should have never messaged you in the hospital, and can we sit down and talk?
Right.
And then go with it from there. That's not saying that you're not feeling right about your position on an issue or something like that. It's just acknowledging that was one of the douchiest things someone's ever done to me. One of the douchiest, not the worst one.
Yeah.
Not the worst one. I've had worse.
Sure.
There's a woman, Margot, that comes to mind. But and what was that other one? Deb. Yeah, that one. That one got my kid too. Bitch. But I digress.
Yeah.
But yeah. Outside of that, I couldn't even fathom somebody treating me that.
Yeah.
Or anyone. I just.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind when I was getting through all of those emails?
Just, I don't know, shock and frustration, and I was just amazed. It's like he was a completely different guy.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to. So that happened, and then I misspoke earlier when I said there was nothing between July 4th and July 9th. Actually, July 6th. So just a couple days later, the emails started again. And this will be our dramatic reading for this episode because this is a long one. And
settling, kiddies.
Keep in mind everything that's happened as I'm reading this. The summit that
half monkey, half human,
and I had, followed by Jen talking to him, and me rapidly realizing that my 90-minute conversation with him was apparently all for nothing. This is the next email that I received from
half monkey, half human
on July 6th. At the end of the day, of course, what else would it start with? Okay, sorry. At the end of the day, I felt insulted and disrespected by 3 20-somethings who were guests in my house. And so far, what I have learned all the way around is feelings are irrelevant. So if you wish to move, no one is stopping you. You will not find me asking you to stay. Angela went and confided in a mutual friend about what she thought happened. And guess what she found out? He was not the least bit sympathetic towards her. They insulted and disrespected me and offered no apologies or anything. Of course, nowadays, apologizing is a sign of weakness to kids, since everyone thinks how I feel is irrelevant. You won't find much sympathy from me for any of you. At the end of the day, I walked away, only to hear my name repeated over and over from an adjacent room from 3 people who were guests in my house and using my shit. Was told I was a sexist simply because I was raised to never hit a woman, and stated a fact that I wouldn't have to hit Angela to keep her from beating me up. I once worked at a boarding school too. I was taught passive restraint. I outweigh her 2 to 1. I would simply wrap her up and keep her from hitting me. And by the way, I've been hit by MMA fighters in the past. Takes a really good punch to me to put me down. I got beaten nearly every day of my life growing up. I don't fight because I choose not to. But if my feelings are irrelevant, then fine, move out. I will not be heartbroken over it. Call me an asshole. Call me whatever you like. I've been called worse before. I'll get over it. What I will not get over is being told that how I feel is irrelevant. And no offense, I want Angela to move because 2 people now have brought something to my attention I hadn't noticed before. It was 1, now it's 2 who have mentioned face picking, which is a sign of heroin use. I know she lived in a house where drugs were used. If she wishes to move, I wish she would move sooner rather than later. I don't want to know those 2 people who were right when it becomes too late. Call me an asshole all you like. I'm not a pushover, and I will not feel insulted or disrespected in my own house, period. I told you before that I'm a liberal, but there is nothing bleeding heart about me. Yes, I can be a ruthless SOB when I want to or have to. Sorry, but at the end of the day, I look out for myself and no one else. If that sounds cold, well, sorry, but it is what it is. I've had to do everything for myself since I was about 12, and I will not be made to feel like how I feel about something is irrelevant. If you have issues with this, then maybe it's best you look for new housing. The sooner, the better. In fact, I'm willing to even give you back a portion of this month's rent if it's that important to you all. At the end of the day, how I feel is not irrelevant, no matter how much you and Jen love Jesse or Angela. At the end of the day, I am going to look out for myself. Sorry about that, but as basically Republican capitalists, it seems to me you all should be able to respect those sentiments anyway. Again, call me whatever you wish, since it seems no one is able to even recognize the fact that I felt insulted and disrespected in my own house, even after I tried to remove myself from their company. And by the way, I was never even asked if Jesse could have a friend stay over for the night either. At the end of the day, I'm not his father. He shouldn't expect that he can expect the same treatment from me as his parents. By the way, that was not the first time he made me feel disrespected either. The first time was when, after working at Brothers and having no sleep, he insulted me because I was too slow to help him in moving a couch. A couch I ended up moving anyways. He called me useless that day, by the way. So I'm at a point now where I feel it impossible to sympathize with any of you. Sorry about that, but that's the way it is. If how I feel is irrelevant, then how you feel to me is also irrelevant, and I don't wish to discuss it any further anymore, period. Oh, by the way, I think I forgot to mention, this email is titled, My Last Post on the Subject, which is funny because obviously that was not his last post on the subject, and I knew that it wouldn't be when I received the email.
And obviously, if you heard our beginning commentary before reading that, you can see why he treated me the way that he did.
Yep.
You can see why he didn't answer the door or talk to anyone. And you can see, in his own words, what a liar he is.
Yep. And my conversation with him?
Lies.
A couple nights earlier, it was like it never even happened.
Lies.
A couple other observations, too. Of course, we've talked about how his behavior parallels that of
Napoleon Bonaparte,
whom he was obviously so critical of. One of the things that shows up in here is he talks about he has to be a ruthless SOB sometimes. He repeatedly referenced a post that
Napoleon Bonaparte
had put on Facebook when all this was going on, and
Napoleon Bonaparte
was trying to throw us all out and whatnot. At one point,
Napoleon Bonaparte
had posted on Facebook, I wouldn't be where I am at 25 if I wasn't a little bit ruthless sometimes. Which I told
half monkey, half human
about that post. And then
half monkey, half human
references that in some of his emails to
Napoleon Bonaparte.
And now here is
half monkey, half human
saying, I can be a ruthless SOB if I have to.
And also, he's point blank says he could care less about anybody else's feelings.
Right.
And again, I'll repeat that I was not involved in the altercation that occurred.
Right.
And the next day, I ended up in the hospital where I stayed for 3 days.
Yeah.
You know, so to become it's ridiculous. I mean, I can't make any sense out of it.
You also hear, I think, 5 times in this email at the end of the day.
Yes.
That will become a theme as the series progresses. You'll notice more and more repetitive phrases.
And you also will note the phrase, call me an asshole.
Yep, no one ever called him an asshole. I mean, not to his face or in emails or anything, but that repeatedly comes up too. Yes, he is. I mean, of course, we would say that about him, but not to him. But that theme shows up constantly in these emails going forward. Everybody calls me an asshole, call me an asshole all you want, everything. And I don't know if he's assuming that we're calling him that. I don't know if it's because he imagines things that didn't happen. He thinks at one point we did when we didn't.
There's also, have you noticed throughout the emails, there's this underlying theme that he has spent his entire life in chronically bad situations with terrible roommates. He's never had good roommates. He's always getting hit, and by women. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just this whole victimhood. I was stolen from, I was robbed, I was beaten, this terrible roommate, that terrible roommate, this terrible roommate. And then it refers to Angela, who pays rent as a guest. It just this ongoing theme of his that, you know, he can't successfully have a friendship or live with other people without sabotaging it at some point. And I think that's what his history is he's probably done the same thing repetitively with other people, where he keeps talking about all these other bad situations of just self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Because this entire thing, whole started with him sabotaging.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, we will conclude this episode, and we will be back tomorrow with episode 17. So in the meantime, if you have a roommate who likes to get drunk and send you threatening emails, ask yourself, do you feel safe?
Do you?
Good night.
Night.
IPMNation.com